Well, welcome to Nimitz Library. I am Mrs. Fong. I am actually at the ninth grade campus right now because I'm learning how to do WeVideo with Ms. Gonzalez. We are your Nimitz Library Tando, and today I'm going to be sharing with you for Hispanic Heritage Month a first chapter Friday reading from Accidental Love by Gary Soto. And we are reading this to you with permission from the publisher, and let's get right into it. Today's reading is actually an ebook, and I wanted you to see how easy this is. So I have this loaded up here, and that's where I'm going to be sharing chapter 1 of Accidental Love from. Accidental Love is about a girl that unexpectedly falls in love with a nerdy boy. 14-year-old Marissa is our main character. She works to change her life by transferring to another school, and she alters some of her behavior. She even loses some weight because she wants to feel a little better about herself. So let's just jump right into the story. At 14, Marissa welcomed any excuse to miss school, but today she had a good reason for cutting class. Alicia, her best friend, lay in a hospital with a broken leg and a broken heart, all because her boyfriend had crashed his parents' car when his tire blew. The leg had broken in the crash, but her heart had broken when the glove compartment opened on impact, and out shot a photo of a stupid Roberto with his arm around another girl. Marissa was off to give her homegirl a meaningful hug. "He's such a shisty rat," she growled as she pictured that no-good Roberto, an average-looking fool whose fingers were always orange from eating Cheetos. She, too, savored that junk food snack, but, she argued, at least she always licked her fingers clean. Not him, stupid jerk, big pendejo. How could Alicia stand his face? She was always treating him to food and paying for gas and for their car rides to the country. Marissa's anger was deflected to a passing station wagon that nearly hit her as she started across the street. "Estúpido!" she spat as she threw her hands into the air in anger. A pair of eyes she saw in the rearview mirror were old and could have belonged to any of her 6 aunts. Ay, Chihuahua. How Marissa's grandmother bore children, all female, all large, all different as pepper from salt. Marissa admonished herself for yelling at the elderly driver. Maybe it was one of mis tias, she told herself. Her rage dissolved. Her thoughts returned to Alicia, tucked away in a hospital bed, and then quickly to Roberto, the rat. If my boyfriend was cheating on me, she was brooding when she remembered she didn't have a boyfriend. So why worry? She found herself struggling and then shrugging and thinking she'd never have a boyfriend as she peeked at her stomach with its roll of fat. Room 438, she told herself as the salmon-colored hospital came into view. That's where homegirl is. She's going to be hecka surprised. Marissa swallowed her fear. Hospitals were where you went to die. She remembered Grandma Olga's last days, her grandmother struggling with cancer, rolling from her side to her stomach to sitting on the bed and dangling her rope-thin legs, dying. Marissa thought then was a matter of getting comfortable. Marissa rode up an elevator between 2 male nurses with paper booties on their shoes, and she herself considered becoming a nurse, but that was years before, when she had dolls whose arms would fall off and she would stick the arms back on only to have them fall off again. The dolls, she remembered, lay under her bed, their eyes open, but not taking in a whole lot. The elevator opened with a sigh. Marissa stepped out, glancing slowly left, then right. Room 438, she muttered as she cut a glance to a man in a wheelchair pushing himself up the hallway by the strength of his thin arms. A bottle of clear fluid hung on a pole behind him, and clear tubes were delivering that fluid into his arms. Marissa grimaced. She would hate to have something stabbing her like that all day. Does that hurt? Like a pinch? She wondered. Like a bee sting? When she located the room, Alicia was staring gloomily toward the ceiling. For a moment, Marissa figured Alicia was appealing to God in heaven, but as she stepped inside, she realized her eyes were just raised to a muted television. On the screen, some carpenter was carrying a sheet of plywood over his head. It was some boring home decorating show, the kind her mother liked to watch on Saturday afternoons. Hey, girl, Marissa greeted loudly. Alicia lowered her eyes to her friend. For a few seconds, her face was expressionless. Then it slowly blossomed with a smile. Her eyes narrowed to little slits of light. Marissa! She raised a feeble hand, and Marissa grasped her friend's hand and gave it a squeeze, and then she smothered Alicia with a hug. How's it? Your pata? Marissa asked as she sat on the edge of the bed. It's not my leg. She wrapped her heart as if it were a door. Is this that's hurting? Marissa's eyes flashed as her mind fluttered with the image of Roberto. Sure, he got in trouble with his parents and he crashed the car, but wasn't Alicia worse off? I told you he was no good, Marissa offered. Is your mom really mad? Alicia's mother was an accountant and was not only good at numbers, but also good at keeping tabs on her daughter's whereabouts. A little bit, actually a lot, she answered weakly. Her tiny hand squeezed her blanket. Marissa, a big girl whose shadow covered other people's when they walked together, couldn't help but think of Alicia as a little doll. She couldn't keep herself from saying, You look so tiny, girl. I am tiny. This truth made Marissa smolder. How dare Roberto cheat on my tiny little homegirl? How she would love to get into a headlock and bounce his head off a wall. She watched enough wrestling on TV. She knew how to do it. My mom says I can't see him anymore. My mom would be hecka mad, Marissa said. And my dad? She shrugged. She wasn't clear how her dad would view such a tragedy. He was a lot more carefree. But her mom? She pictured her mom at the stove, smashing beans into refritos and yelling over the radio that her daughter was headed down the wrong road, blah, blah, blah. What are you doing here? How come you're not at school? Alicia asked. Seeing you. I just walked right out of the school and 2 miles to get here. She pinched her stomach. I'm going to start losing weight. You look good. Mentirosa. Marissa swiped a light slap on her friend's arm. She repeated how she'd bounced down the stairs out of the second floor East Hall, walked out of Washington High School during morning break. The security guard even waved her goodbye. That's how much they didn't care. Alicia placed a hand over her mouth and laughed. You're mala. Your mom and dad's going to find out. So? But Marissa was worried. Her mom had threatened if she got in trouble again at school. She'd already been suspended for a week for fighting over lip gloss she lent somebody. She was going to send her away to live with one of her aunts. Marissa didn't want to get into trouble again, but the idea of going to a new school did appeal to her. She knew she'd miss a few friends, but she could always depend on her cell phone. Every month she was loaded with free minutes. Alicia's eyes suddenly filled and 2 lines of tears traced down her cheek. Marissa thumbed the salty track, making its way down the left side of her chin, and she was amazed how cool the tear was. If she were crying, her tears would be hot as motor oil. Do you want me to hit him? Marissa asked her. Her hand closed into a rock-hard fist. Who? Alicia said, sounding like a sad owl. Roberto. Roberto was tall but lanky. Marissa imagined she could just lower her shoulder and bulldoze him into the lockers and follow up with a slap to his face. This, too, she'd learned from watching wrestling. Who said TV was a waste of time? No, Alicia said. Then she pouted like a fish. I don't need him. You go, girl. Marissa smiled and leaned her face into her friend's shoulder. She hugged her and told her how they could depend on no one but each other. Marissa's own tears began to roll from her eyes, but the girl stopped hugging when Marissa heard a voice behind her. The voice belonged to someone Marissa knew. Her mother. Busted, Marissa thought as she swiped away the tears from her eyes and sat up. Hi, Mrs. Rodriguez, Alicia greeted. I asked Marissa to come and see me. Marissa's mother stood with her hands propped on her hips. Her eyes narrowed darkly. She seemed to weigh whether Alicia was telling the truth. She shook her head, jangling her earrings, and made her judgment. You girls are lying. Marissa's skipping school. You think I was born yesterday? Marissa opened her mouth, forging the image of a daughter shocked that a parent, a mother of all people, didn't believe her. She raised her hands to Heck's chest as if to say, "You mean me?" She would have stamped her foot dramatically in protest to her mother's verdict, but she was sitting on the edge of a high hospital bed and her feet didn't touch the floor. "Don't say anything I can use against you later," Mother warned, a storm beginning to rage inside her. Her mother sounded like the police. And to Marissa, she was the police, with her own court and her own punishment. "It's my fault, Mrs. Rodriguez," Alicia piped up. "I told her to come." Marissa's mother ignored her as she repeated the lie, obvious, because Marissa volunteered a truth. "Nah, I came on my own, Mom. It's my fault." "I'll be talking to you later," her mother told Marissa. "Aren't you sorry I decided to come visit Alicia myself?" She turned her hard gaze from her daughter to Alicia. Her mother's eyes softened, the storm inside of her subsiding. "How are you, mija?" "It's only a fracture," Alicia replied with her hand on her heart. "The doctor's releasing me tomorrow." "Cool," said Marissa. Marissa's mother frowned at her daughter. Then she took her attention back to Alicia and asked if the doctor prescribed pain pills and how long her leg would be in the cast. She didn't ask about the boy who'd been driving the car when the accident occurred. "I got some pills and it really don't hurt so bad. It itches." Alicia pulled up the bed sheet and revealed a blue cast that came up to her thigh. "It's really hard." Marissa was curious how Alicia would shower. Wouldn't that cast get soggy and fall off? But instead she asked, "Did they get you some getaway sticks, some crutches?" "Not yet. Somebody's going to teach me to use them today." They talked mainly about school and family. When Alicia mentioned the fall dance and a tide of tears rode up in her eyes, Marissa's mother patted her hand. She produced from her purse a small package of miniature white powdered donuts. "I know sweets aren't very good for you," Mother whispered as she gazed back at the door, where occasionally a nurse would pass by in the hallway, "but these will make you feel better. They're better than pain pills. And forget about that dance. There'll be others." Marissa was going to snap, "You never buy me donuts like that." But her mouth, which often got her into trouble, closed quickly as it had opened. She realized that Alicia was hurt and that her mother was displaying concern. "Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. I love these," Alicia said. She opened up the package and offered the first donut to Marissa. Marissa was moved. "She's a true friend," she told herself, took a bite, and then offered the rest to Alicia, who opened up her mouth and closed it around the donut. Some crumbs fell onto the front of Alicia's hospital gown, but she scooped them up. Then she sucked them down like a vacuum, like Marissa knew she would do in private, but never when somebody was looking. The intimate gesture convinced her that Alicia was her best friend forever. Marissa's mother refused the donuts, but the girls ate until they were gone, and both wished for glasses of milk to wash them down with. "Okay, let's go," Marissa's mother ordered her daughter as she got off the bed, smoothing her dress. Marissa's hand raised as if holding a cell phone. "Call you later." Alicia blew her friend a kiss. Mother and daughter rode down the noiseless elevator. Marissa expected her mother to yell, but Mother, looking into her compact and dabbing at her mouth with some red lipstick, instead told her they had to stop at a repair shop. She'd discovered a nail in the left front tire. Marissa was baffled. Roberta's parents' car had something wrong with the tire. Now a nail was protruding from a tire on their car. Were tire problems more common than she realized? She was mulling this new mystery when the elevator opened. Marissa gasped. In the front of her stood Roberto, who looked like damaged goods because of the bandages on his head and his right forearm. His arm cradled flowers that were at least a day old and already starting to sag. "You shanky dude." She caught herself cursing in her mind. She pushed aside the guy who was with Roberto. Both of her hands closed into fists. She couldn't help herself, even as her mother pulled her and warned her, "Marissa, stop." Marissa shrugged out of her mother's grip. "You cheater! She loved you so much," Marissa yelled. She hauled off and fired a stiff punch into Roberto's iron flat stomach. She'd always suspected a tapeworm lay curled in there, devouring all those bags of Cheetos. The flowers popped out of her arms. She stomped on them and went to thrash from all angles. Watching all that wrestling on TV was beginning to pay off. Okay, guys, that's the end of chapter 1, and we want to thank HarperCollins for their permission to read chapter 1. That is Accidental Love by Gary Soto. And I hope you enjoyed, and we'll be back next Friday with another Hispanic author, and we'll be continuing with Hispanic authors until the end of Hispanic Heritage Month. Sorry about that. And we hope to see you next Friday.